Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We'll just be starting now. Great. So please take a seat if you haven't already. It'd be great to have everybody ready to go for a lovely afternoon. My name is Mary Bergman. I'm the chair of the Nantucket Book Festival, and I just want to thank all of you, all of our sponsors and donors, and all of our festival committee members and many volunteers in the blue shirts who have dedicated their whole weekend to helping us with this great event. Just a short note that we are not going to have a question and answer session, so if you have any questions or anything you want to discuss with Martín downstairs right after, there'll be a book signing on the lawn. Martín Espada has published more than 20 books as a poet, editor, essayist, and translator. His latest book of poems is called Floaters, winner of the 2021 National Book Award and a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Other books of poems include Vivas to Those Who Have Failed, The Trouble Ball, The Republic of Poetry, and Imagine the Angels of Bread. He is the editor of What Saves Us, Poems of Empathy and Outrage in the Age of Trump. He's received numerous awards, including the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, the Shelley Memorial Award, the Robert Creeley Award, and an Academy of American Poets Fellowship, the Penn Revision Fellowship, and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. His book of essays and poems, Zapata's Disciple, was banned in Tucson as part of the Mexican American Studies program outlawed by the state of Arizona. A former tenant lawyer in Greater Boston, Espada is a professor of English at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Please join me in welcoming Martín Espada.
Buenas tardes. Thank you. It's great to be here in this historic venue. I want to thank Mary Bergman, who invited me and who introduced me. I also want to thank someone who is not here, Alicia here at the Regatta Inn, who has been absolutely wonderful. And how often do we actually get up here and thank our innkeepers? So even though she's not here, please give her a hand. I want to thank my wife, Lauren, too, who is in the first row and who is also present on every single page of this book, Floaters, you'll be hearing from this afternoon. I'm going to read some poems from the book, and as you heard, since this is a reading, and I will be doing a signing in the garden below. If you have any questions, please come see me at that time. I want to begin, as they say at the beginning, and this is the first poem in the book, and a poem that establishes some themes and some context, tells you something about who I am and who I used to be. This particular poem is called Jumping Off the Mystic Tobin Bridge. So 30 years ago, I was not known as a poet. 30 years ago, I was known as a tenant lawyer, because that's what I did. I was a supervisor of a program called Su Clínica Legal. Su Clínica Legal was a legal services program for low-income Spanish-speaking tenants in Chelsea, Massachusetts. You know Chelsea? Yeah, it's a tough little town right across the Tobin Bridge from Boston, a gateway city, a city of immigrants. It always has been. And in those days, my clients came from Puerto Rico, from the Dominican Republic, but more and more from Central America, especially from El Salvador and Guatemala. They were refugees from Reagan's wars in those days. So this is a poem where I look at the present through the lens of the past. And by the way, the second half of the poem segs into the Chuck Stewart murder case, the most notorious murder case in the history of Boston. So we begin here, jumping off the mystic Tobin Bridge. I close my eyes and see him windmilling his arms as he plummets from the mystic Tobin Bridge to prove me wrong, to show me he was good, to atone for sins like seeds in the lopsided apple of his heart, but mostly to escape from me in the back of his cab, a Puerto Rican lawyer in a suit and tie. I hated the 111 bus. Sweltering in my suit and tie with the crowd in the aisle, waiting to hit a bump on the mystic Tobin Bridge so my head would finally burst through the ceiling like a giraffe on a circus train. I hated the 111 bus after eviction day in Chelsea District Court, translating the landlords and judges into Spanish so the tenants knew they had to stuff their clothing into garbage bags and steal away again. Away from the 40-watt squint that followed them everywhere, that followed me because I stood beside them in court. I would daydream in the humidity of the bus, a basketball hero, flipping the balled-up pages of the law into the wastebasket at the office as the legal aid lawyers chanted my name. I hated the 111 bus. I had to take a taxi cab that day. "What the hell you doing here?" said the driver of the cab to me in my suit and tie. "You gotta be careful in this neighborhood. There's a lot of Jose's around here." The driver's great-grandfather staggered off a boat so his great-grandson could one day drive me across the mystic Tobin Bridge, but there was no room in the taxi but chalk and a blackboard. He could hear the sawing of my breath as I leaned into his ear past the bulletproof barricade somehow missing and said, "I'm a Jose." I could see the 40-watt squint in his rearview mirror. "I'm Puerto Rican," I said. It was exactly 5 p.m., and we were stuck in traffic in a taxi on the mystic Tobin Bridge. The driver stammered his own West Side story without the ballet, how a Puerto Rican gang stole his cousin's wallet years ago. "You think I'm going to rob you?" I said, in my suit and tie, close enough now to tickle his ear with the mouth of a revolver. I could hear the sawing of his breath. He still wanted to know what I was doing there. "I'm a lawyer. I go to court with all the Jose's," I said. Stalled traffic steamed around us, the breath of cattle in the winter air. Where you going for the holidays?" the driver said. I thought about Christmas Eve in court, eviction orders flying from the judge's bench when tenants without legal aid lawyers or children old enough to translate the English of the summons did not answer to their names. Every year the legal aid lawyers told a joke about the Christmas defense. "Your Honor, it's Christmas." I said to the driver, "I will be spending Christmas right here with my fellow Jose's." The driver shouted, "What do you want me to do? Get out of this cab and jump off the bridge?" We both knew what he meant. We both knew about Chuck Stewart, the last man to jump off the mystic Tobin Bridge. Everybody knew how Chuck drove his wife to Mission Hill after birthing classes, the flash and pop in the dark when he shot her in the head and himself in the belly. Everybody knew how he conjured a black carjacker on a crackling call to 911, the way the Mercury Theater on the air conjured Martians in New Jersey on the radio half a century before. Everybody knew how 100 cops pounded on door after door in the projects of Mission Hill, locking a black man in a cage for the world to see, like the last of his tribe on exhibit at the World's Fair. Everybody knew how Chuck would have escaped cashing the insurance check to drive away with a new Nissan, but for his brother's confession, the accomplice throwing the Gucci bag with makeup, the wedding rings, and the gun off the dizzy bridge in Revere. Everybody knew how Chuck parked his new car on the lower deck, left a note, and launched himself deep into the black water, how the cops hauled his body from the river by lunchtime when I walked into the office to tell the secretary, Chuck Stewart just jumped off the mystic Tobin Bridge. I said nothing to the driver. I almost nodded yes in the rearview mirror. I confess, for a flash, I wanted him to jump. The driver, the cops, the landlords, the judges, all wanted us to jump off the Mystic Tobin Bridge. All wanted us to sprout gills like movie monsters so we could paddle underwater back to the islands, down into the weeds and mud at the bottom, past the fish-plucked rib cages of the dead, the rusty revolvers of 1,000 crimes unsolved, the wedding rings of marriages gone bad, till we washed up on shore in a tangle of seaweed, gasping for air. Last night, still more landed here, clothing stuffed in garbage bags to flee the god of hurricanes, flinging their houses into the sky, or the god of hunger, slipping his knife between the ribs. Not a dark tide like the tide of the Mystic River, but builders of bridges. You can walk across the bridges they build, or you can jump. Thank you. The next poem is the title poem of this book. Some of you will remember it. There was a photograph that went viral in the summer of 2019. Two Salvadoran migrants, father and daughter, who drowned crossing the Rio Grande. June of 2019. Saw this photograph everywhere. It triggered outrage. It triggered grief. It also triggered what we now call trutherism. There was an anonymous post in the I'm 1015 Border Patrol Facebook group charging that this photograph was a fake, doctored. And so the poem is a response to this photograph, but also a response to these charges. Floaters, by the way, is the term used by many members of the Border Patrol to describe those who drown crossing over. So, floaters, and this has an epigraph. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and ask, have y'all ever seen floaters this clean? I'm not trying to be an ass, but I have never seen floaters like this. Could this be another edited photo? We've all seen the Dems and liberal parties do some pretty sick things. Anonymous post, I'm 1015, Border Patrol Facebook group. Like a beer bottle thrown into the river by a boy too drunk to cry. Like the shard of a styrofoam cup drained of coffee, brown as the river. Like the plank of a fishing boat broken in half by the river, the dead float. And the dead have a name. Floaters, say the men of the Border Patrol, keeping watch all night by the river, hearts pumping coffee as they say the word floaters, soft as a bubble, hard as a shoe, as it nudges the body to see if it breathes, to see if it moans, to see if it sits up and speaks. And the dead have names. A feast day parade of names. Names that dress all in red. Names that twirl skirts. Names that blow whistles. Names that shake rattles. Names that sing in praise of the saints. Say, Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. Say, Angie Valeria Martinez Avalos. See how they rise off the tongue, the calling of bird to bird somewhere in the trees above our heads, trilling in the dark heart of the leaves. Say what we know of them now they are dead. Oscar slapped dough for pizza with oven-blistered fingers. Daughter Valeria sang, banging a toy guitar. He slipped free of the apron he wore in the blast of the oven, sold the motorcycle he would kick till it sputtered to life, counted off pesos for the journey across the river, and the last of his 25 years, and the last of her 23 months. There is another name that beats its wings in the heart of the trees. Say, Tanya Vanessa Abalos, Oscar's wife from Valeria's mother, the witness, stumbling along the river. Now their names rise off her tongue. Say, Oscar y Valeria. He swam from Matamoros across to Brownsville. The girl slung around his neck, stood her in the weeds on the Texas side of the river, swore to return with her mother in hand, turning his back as fathers do, who later say, I turned around and she was gone. In the time it takes for a bird to hop from branch to branch, Valeria jumped in the river after her father. Maybe he called out her name as he swept her up from the river. Maybe the river drowned out his voice as the water swept them away. Tanya called out the names of the saints, but the saints drowsed in the stupor of birds in the dark, their cages covered with blankets. The men on patrol would never hear their pleas for asylum, watching for floaters, hearts pumping coffee all night on the Texas side of the river. No one, they say, had ever seen floaters this clean. Oscar's black shirt yanked up to the armpits, Valeria's arms slung around her father's neck. Even after the light left her eyes, both face down in the weeds back on the Mexican side of the river. Another edited photo. See how her head disappears in his shirt, the waterlogged diaper bunched in her pants, the blue of the blue cans. The radio warned us about the crisis actors we see at one school shooting after another. The man called, Oscar will breathe, sit up, speak, tug the black shirt over his head, shower off the mud, and shake hands with the photographer. Yet, the floaters did not float on the Rio Grande like Olympians showing off the backstroke, nor did their souls float up to Dallas, land of rumored jobs and a president shot in the head as he waved from his motorcade. No bubbles rose from their breath in the mud, light as the iridescent circles of soap that would fascinate a 2-year-old. And the dead still have names, names that sing in praise of the saints, names of flower and blossoms of white, a cortege of names dressed all in black, trailing the coffins to the cemetery. Carve their names in headlines and gravestones they would never know in the kitchens of this cacophonous world. Enter their names in the book of names. Say, Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. Say, Angie Valeria Martinez Avalos. Bury them in a corner of the cemetery named for the sainted Archbishop of the Poor, shot in the heart saying Mass, bullets bought by the taxes I paid when I worked as a bouncer and fractured my hand 40 years ago, and bumper stickers read, El Salvador is Spanish for Vietnam. When the last bubble of breath escapes the body, may the men who speak of floaters, who have never seen floaters this clean, float through the clouds to the heavens, where they paddle the air as they wait for the saint who flips through the keys on his ring like a drowsy janitor, till he fingers the key that turns the lock and shuts the gate on their babble-tongued faces, and they plunge back to earth, a shower of hailstones pelting the river, the Mexican side of the river. Well, I firmly believe that times of hate call for poems of love. It's all about love, after all, right? At the bottom, the work we do. I heard Taya say that yesterday. It's all about love in the end. My wife, Lauren Maria Espada, is a poet, 4 books to her credit. She's a novelist. She's a committed teacher. Spent many years in urban education, including Springfield, Massachusetts, some of you may know. And she would leave in the dark and come home in the dark. That is the foundation of the next poem. And Abad is a French verse form. It's about the parting of lovers at dawn. And did we ever? So, this is called Abad with Concussion. Epigraph. Poverty is black ice. Naomi Ajala. You leave me sleeping in the dark. You kiss me and I stir. Fingers in your hair, eyes open, unseeing. You leave me asleep every morning, commuting to the school in the city at sunrise. The landlord's driveway, a muddy creek, ices over hard after the freezing rain clatters all night. Your feet fly up, your head slamming the ground, an eclipse of the sun flooding your eyes. You sleep under the car. No one knows how long you sleep. You awake with 100 ice picks stabbing your eardrums. You awake, coat and hair soaked, and somehow drive to school. You remember to turn left at the Smith & Wesson factory. The other teachers lead you by the elbow to Mercy Hospital, where you pause when the nurse asks your name, where you claim your pain level is a 4. And they slide you into the white coffin of an MRI machine. You hold your breath. They film your brain. Concussion. The word we use for the boxer plunging face first to the canvas after the uppercut blindsided him, not the teacher commuting to school at sunrise in a Subaru Crosstrek. Yet, you would drive, ears hammering as they hammer in the purgatory of the MRI. A week before, Isabella came to you in the classroom and said, "Miss, I cannot sleep. 3 days, I cannot sleep." Her boyfriend called at 2 a.m. and she did not pick up. At 3 a.m., a single shot to the head put him to sleep. And he will sleep forever. His body hidden beneath a car in a parking lot on Maple Street. The cops, the television cameras, the neighbors all gathering at the yellow tape carnival of his corpse. You said to Isabella, "Take this journal. Write it down. You don't have to show me. You don't have to show anyone." On the cover of the journal you bought at the drugstore was the word dream. Isabella sat there in your classroom at your desk, pencil waving in furious circles. By lunchtime, as her friends slapped each other, Isabella slept. Head on the desk, face pressed against the pages of the journal. This is why I watch you sleep at 3 a.m. when the sleeping pills fail to quell the strike meeting in my brain. This is why I say to you when you kiss me in my sleep, "Don't go, don't go." You have to go. Lauren and I celebrated our wedding anniversary this past Monday. We were married in our living room by a justice of the peace. This is the sonnet I wrote for the ceremony. It's called, "Love is a Luminous Insect at the Window," for Lauren Marie Espada, June 13th, 2019. The word love, there it is again. Indestructible as an insect, fly faster than the swatter, mosquito darting through the net. How the word love chirps in every song, crickets keeping a city boy up all night. I wish I could fry and eat them. How the word love buzzes in sonnet after sonnet. I am the beekeeper who wakes from a nightmare of beehives. To quote Duran, the Panamanian brawler who waved a glove and walked away in the middle of a fight. No más, no more. Then I see you, watching the violinist, his eyes shut, the Russian composer's concerto in his head, white horsehair fraying on the bow, and your face is bright with tears. And there it is again, the word love, not a fly or a mosquito, not a cricket or a bee, but the Luna moth we saw one night, luminous green wings knocking at the screen on the window, as if to say, I have a week to live, let me in. And I do. I'm trying to read this clock. About 20 minutes? Yeah. 15. Oh. All right. I will now read my translation of Beowulf. No, I'm not going to do that. Nor am I going to read you any poems with Roman numerals. I will read this. There are all kinds of love poems, as it turns out. This is a poem for a man by the name of Jack Agüeros. And Jack Agüeros was a New York, Puerto Rican poet, fiction writer, essayist, translator, community organizer, director of El Museo del Barrio in East Harlem, and most importantly, my second father. So here's a poem for Jack, and it's called Flan. You know, flan, right? They have flan in Nantucket. Flan for Jack Agüeros, 1934 to 2014. I was 8 when the blackout struck and the lights died all across the city like a massacre of fireflies. In the projects of Brooklyn, I steered myself to 14F, fingers spread against the cool tiles of the hallway past the concrete and chicken wire terrace where I once burnt ants with a magnifying glass. Many years later, at the Chinese restaurant uptown, Jack said, "They got any flan here?" He was my first poet. I had seen the fireflies in his sonnets blink and float away. Fulano, the philosopher in the unemployment line. Blanco, the painter, painting in the madhouse. Monterosa, the dealer killed by shotgun in a bar on Avenue A. His mother, the seamstress, in the quick needle of her sewing machine. Jack, the moving man, his hands sliced raw. He stacked his apartment with dictionaries in 3 languages. I knew the raconteur's grin with every tale. Raúl Juliá, he's a friend of mine, a Puerto Rican playing Macbeth. He took 14 curtain calls on opening night. Maybe he would tell me now that flan was not Puerto Rican or Mexican or Spanish, but Chinese, invented by a trembling cook to satisfy the palate of an emperor in the Ming Dynasty. No flan, Jack, I said. This is a Chinese restaurant. 2 minutes later, he said, they got any flan? I showed him the dog-eared and fingerprinted menu. No flan, I said. When the waiter unfurled his pad, Jack said to him, you got flan? He sang this song for an hour. The egg roll was not flan. The fried rice was not flan. The fortune cookie was not flan. Can we get some flan? He said. God damn it, Jack, I said. The poets crowded into the bar, striding to the mic. Jack stood with poem in hand, read the title, tilted his head, and said it again, studied the page as if the words shriveled up like ants burnt under a magnifying glass, then sat down. I witnessed the massacre of fireflies. A few of us clapped, not knowing what to do with our hands, staring at the sonneteer who lost all his quatrains and couplets in the denim jacket he left on the subway, the words of Fulano still waiting on the unemployment line. The faster you spin, the stiller you look. There's something to learn in that. But what? After the diagnosis, I handed Jack a book of poems. He dangled the book upside down like a stiff mouse by the tail, something we would sniff behind the refrigerator. I wanted sonnets. Jack kept singing the chorus of a song. Get me to the church. Get me to the church. Get me to the church on time. At the end, I leaned over Jack's bed to read his own poem in his ear, but some words come home after the blackout fingers crawling on the wall. I know what I should have said at the Chinese restaurant. Jack, let's get some flan. We should have braved the subway at rush hour, strap hangers rocking all the way to 14th Street and 8th Avenue to La Taza de Oro, gone now like Jack for rice and beans, squid in its own ink, café con leche y flan, Jack. A spoonful of flan for you? After all the years of sonnets and bread from me, the steam rising when your hands crack the crust at the table. And now I'll finish with this poem. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. Fathers. My father, Francisco Luis Espada, Frank Espada, was born in the mountain town of Utuado, Puerto Rico in the year 1930. Died in Pacifica, California in the year 2014. He was a community organizer, civil rights activist, a leader, many people would say the leader of the Puerto Rican community in New York City during the decade of the 1960s. Most importantly, he was a documentary photographer. He created something called the Puerto Rican Diaspora Documentary Project, a photo documentary of the Puerto Rican migration. And his photographs are now included in the collections of the Smithsonian Museum of American History, Smithsonian Museum of American Art, National Portrait Gallery, and the Library of Congress. Not bad. When Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico in the fall of 2017, I suddenly saw Utuado, his hometown, absolutely everywhere. I saw it on television, I saw it in the headlines, I saw it online. According to the journalist John Lee Anderson in the pages of The New Yorker, Utuado had become, quote, a byword for the island's devastation. We now know that at least 4,000 people died. So I began talking to my father. Not unusual to talk to the dead, especially not unusual if it so happens you have their ashes in a box on your bookshelf. So that was the genesis of the last poem in this book and the last poem I'll read to you this afternoon. Again, thank you very much for being here, and please come say hello downstairs in the garden. Letter to my father, October 2017. You once said, my reward for this life will be 1,000 pounds of dirt shoveled in my face. You were wrong. You are 7 pounds of ashes in a box, a Puerto Rican flag wrapped around you, next to a red brick from the house in Utuado where you were born, all crammed together on my bookshelf. You taught me there is no God, no life after this life, so I know you're not watching me type this letter over my shoulder. When I was a boy, you were God. I watched from the 7th floor of the projects as you walked down into the street to stop a public execution. A big man caught a small man stealing his car, and everyone in Brooklyn heard the car alarm wail of the condemned, "He's killing me!" At a word from you, the executioner's hand slipped from the hair of the thief. "The kid was high," was all you said when you came back to us. When I was a boy, and you were God, we flew to Puerto Rico. You said, my grandfather was the mayor of Utuado. His name was Buenaventura. That means good fortune. I believed in your grandfather's name. I heard the tree frogs chanting to each other all night. I saw a banana leaf and elephant palms sprouting from the mountain's belly. I gnawed the mango's pit, and the sweet yellow hair stuck between my teeth. I said to you, you came from another planet. How'd you do it? You said, every morning, just before I woke up, I saw the mountains. Every morning, I see the mountains. And Utuado, 3 sisters, all in their 70s, all bedridden, all Pentecostales who only left the house for church, lay sleeping on mattresses spread across the floor when the hurricane gutted the mountain the way a butcher slices open a dangled pig, and a rolling wall of mud buried them, leaving the 4th sister to stagger into the street, screaming like an unheeded prophet about the end of the world. And Utuado, a man who cultivated a garden of aguacate and carambola, feeding the avocado and star fruit to his nieces from New York, so the trees in his garden beheaded all at once like the soldiers of a beaten army, and so hanged himself. And Utuado, a welder and a handyman, rigged a pulley with a shopping cart to ferry rice and beans across the river where the bridge collapsed, witnessed the cart swaying above so many hands that raised the sign that told the helicopters, Campamento los Olvidados. camp of the forgotten. Los olvidados wait 7 hours in line for a government meal of Skittles and Vienna sausage, or a tarp to cover the bones of a house with no roof as the fungus grows on their skin from sleeping on mattresses drenched with the spit of the hurricane. They drink the brown water, waiting for microscopic monsters in their bellies to visit plagues upon them. A nurse says, "These people are going to have an epidemic. These people are going to die." The president flips rolls of paper towels to a crowd at a church in Guaynabo, Zeus lobbing thunderbolts on the locked ward of his delusions. Down the block, cousin Ricardo, Bernice's boy, says that somebody stole his can of diesel. I heard somebody ask you once, well, Puerto Rico needed to be free, and you said, 3 pulgadas de sangre en la calle. 3 inches of blood in the street. Now, 3 inches of mud flow through the streets of Utuado, and troops patrol the town as if guarding the vein of copper in the ground, as if a shovel digging graves in the backyard might strike the ore below, as if La Brigada swinging machetes to clear the road might remember the last uprising. I know you're not God. I have the proof. 7 pounds of ashes in a box on my bookshelf. Gods do not die, and yet I want you to be God again. Stride from the crowd to seize the president's arm before another roll of paper towels sails away. Thunder Spanish obscenities in his face. Banish him to a roofless rainstorm in Utuado so he unravels one soaked sheet after another till there is nothing left but his cardboard heart. I promised myself I would stop talking to you. White box of gray grit. You were deaf even before you died. Hear my promise now. I will take you to the mountains where houses lost like ships at sea rise, blue and yellow from the mud. I will open my hands. I will scatter your ashes. En Utuado. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.